My drive for brand comes from the rest of the performance marketing doesn't work. Brands lead to trust. And for performance marketing to work, there needs to be some level of trust already established with the player.
I am super excited for today's guest. John-Henry Scherck is the founder and CEO of Growth Plays. He's undoubtedly one of the leading experts in terms of performance marketing, organic marketing. And I was reflecting on this. I think I've worked with John-Henry. I'll ask him as he comes on at every CMO role I've ever had. At Gainsight, at Front, at Hopin. And as a founder and CEO, not only did I have the privilege to work with John-Henry, again, it's sort of like a vendor relationship, but he was an advisor to our company, and I've learned just so much from him and developed a bit of a friendship kind of over the years here. And so I couldn't think of anyone better to really unpack the future of performance marketing in the AI age than John-Henry Scherck. So please welcome John-Henry to the stage. Hello.
AK, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been a while. Other than that LinkedIn post you had the other day, I don't feel like I've seen you in the real world or online in like going on 6 months now.
Yeah, they basically cut off my internet after Audience Plus. I've been a bit of a ghost for about 6 months. But yeah, no, I mean, it was quite the journey, and again, one that we were privileged to have you be a part of. And so I think a lot of what I've been doing is trying to figure out what's next and try to just kind of sit back and watch all the craziness that's happening right now in marketing, and try to figure out what my role kind of in that next kind of chapter looks like. So this is kind of, this is literally, I think, like the first thing I'm doing kind of ever since those days is going live with you. So I'm excited about that.
Awesome. Glad to be here. Thank you. And yeah, we have worked together. We didn't actually work together at Gainsight. I sold into Gainsight. I didn't win that deal, but every other place, from Hopin or before that, Front to Hopin to Audience Plus, and you've been responsible for introducing us to a ton of folks over the years. So it's been great working with you, and I think Audience Plus was like one of the more challenging things I've ever marketed in my life, and I think you probably agree with that too. And
I'm trying to figure out if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Well, I think it's interesting because like we're going live and you're broadcasting on LinkedIn. And I think, the big focus of Audience Plus was owned media and having your own system and not, using these like rented third-party algorithms to get distribution. And it's interesting. I think I realize like I'm the podcast guest and you're probably supposed to ask me questions, but the thing I was like, why are we doing this? On like what's shifted you to being more open to social channels for broadcasting, video? Why this instead of doing it on your own, Goldenhour website?
Yeah. Well, I think, even in the early days of Audience Plus, before we ever started shipping content on our own platform, we were starting to have a conversation on what we refer to then as like rented channels on social. And the intention there was to get some validation for the narrative that we have, start building kind of a audience of people that believed in the thing that we were saying. And over time, as that started building, give them a place to go to, effectively dive deeper into the content. And so I think rented and owned were always meant to be semi-connected, right? Like you can't get owned media without good rented. Right now, I don't have an owned anything. Like I'm starting over. I have no I have no subscribers. I have no, whatever. I just, tried to shell out the Substack link there earlier. And so I'm back at square one. Like I have a story that I'm starting to tell, which I think, I will definitely get into around this idea of making your brands more human and why that really is going to be important in the intelligence age. And I'm still in R&D mode to kind of learn and say, hey, does that resonate? Is that a story that people also care about? And so far, the early indicators were good. And the intention is eventually, let's produce more content and let's build kind of that own strategy. So I do think it's important. I think when you're starting over, it's important to kind of just, go into your existing channels and start building, getting some feedback from your existing audience on if the story you're telling is truly resonating.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's new, but I will say though, one of the reasons I wanted to connect with you on this is this idea of brand has been one that you've been very passionate about. And it's interesting because so often we take brand and demand or performance marketing as these two like opposite things. And even at Audience Plus, just to like build a bridge from that last conversation, we were guilty of like trying to like write an anchor page or whatever to appease the algorithm. And you kept pushing us to say like, just produce like original thought and just be provocative, be yourselves, express a point of view, which felt countercultural to my CMO brain as trying to build like traffic or domain authority or these types of things. So I think like this idea of brand humanity isn't just this like corporate marketing thing that I'm trying to push out there, but very connected to pipeline and performance. Do you want to maybe start by just sharing your perspective on brand kind of more broadly and why these things aren't separate things?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just grab this thing from my dog before he rips into pieces. One second. But yeah, so I think that my understanding of brand, it's funny because like as I've grown as a marketer, I think I've gotten like less anchored around just like the tactical SEO world, but like my start and still like in my agency today is like very focused on search and generating traffic through content and primarily like to your website, whether that's Gen AI or search. And where I think like my drive for brand came from is really Google evolving over the years. And when I got started in search in like 2008, 2009, you could spin up a website very easily, especially if like the domain had like the term you wanted to rank for in there. And it took very little work to build traffic. And it was just like growth hacks and brand didn't matter. And Google figured that out. So Google very quickly started prioritizing brands and brand signals. So things like branded search and relevant links from sites versus just like getting garbage links from sort of like the back channels of the internet. And what I saw happening, a shift happening really around SEO being this thing that like unknown early stage companies could dominate because older established players didn't have that like nimble web presence, to Google really rewarding these established players that were trustworthy and wouldn't lead to like negative experiences down the line. Because if you think about Google, if what you get from Google is just bad customer experiences at the end of the day, you're going to stop using Google. So Google started prioritizing brands to essentially like have better like user experiences over time. And I don't think that necessarily always led to the best content ranking, but led to the safest, best outcomes for the broad majority of folks who either purchase things or learn things online versus promoting like the unknown, rebellious, contrarian, but maybe also like spammy and dangerous websites. So for me, brand became like a table stakes motion. And when I say brand, I don't mean like you have to be Oracle, but you have to be legitimate. And I think a lot of companies are like, hey, we're 3 weeks old. How do we just start getting all this traffic from search? It's like, oh, Google doesn't want you to have that. OpenAI doesn't want you to have that. So my drive for brand comes from the rest of the performance marketing doesn't work. And also like, I think when I got started in search, not to monologue here, but like people didn't really know the online world. They didn't know what websites to trust. And now I think people are like, there's a much better sort of like, not really media literacy. I actually think like media literacy has kind of gone down, but like internet navigation, like there's just rules of the road are better understood. And I don't think people are going to take less chances on new brands, new sites. And I think there was so much opportunity with search. And I think the internet was like a much more positive and like, oh, there's just so much out here that I don't know. And now everything's so monetized and there's just so many funnels, and that's what everything leads to. So it's less like, oh, this is a great, brilliant place for me to learn. It's more like a place for me to get sold a course or a product or something like that. And everything kind of leads to that. So I think there's much less trust for newer brands. because almost everything leads to monetization or a funnel or subscriptions, and people want less of that. So I think there's like brands lead to trust, and for performance marketing to work, there needs to be some level of trust already established with the player.
I think that's the root of it. It's our jobs more broadly is to, again, tying a little bit to what we were talking about, is the thing that I believe AI won't replace is things like trust building, authentic kind of relationship development between brands and the customers and the audiences they serve. And so it's funny just how going even to something that can seem so operational and mechanical like SEO, like trust ultimately is still the root driver for that performance working. I wanted to ask you because I can pretend like I know a lot about SEO as a former CMO. But the truth is actually, the more I kind of have some conversations, I actually don't know that CMOs are as proficient on the mechanics, and let alone forget about the mechanics of where we've been, but they're seeing headlines, right? And I'm sure you're seeing them too on like the death of SEO or whatever. And I think SEO has been killed in the headlines many times and yet is still kind of incredibly impactful and important for businesses. I think a lot of stuff's flying over their heads, and I'm curious from your perspective, what's the state of SEO given the AI kind of, call it headwinds, call it just shifting kind of flooring? Like, what do you want CMOs to know about what's happening with SEO and organic kind of more broadly?
I'm going to steal a line from Ryan Law over at Ahrefs, and that is SEO is the worst it's ever been. It's also still likely your best marketing channel. And there's this thing going on right now called the great decoupling, where like impressions are skyrocketing and clicks are the lowest they've ever been. But the thing is like demand by and large for most B2B products has not changed. I think this is a really different conversation for publishers and like page view driven businesses that relied solely on like ranking in Google to get traffic and then selling ads against that traffic. That's a different story. And that's a bigger conversation because I think Gen AI is eating into that business model pretty heavily. At the same time, I think if your entire business model was relying on Google sending you traffic, you've got bigger problems. But with what I want CMOs to take away is like, one, yes, like SEO is becoming tougher and less top of funnel traffic is coming to the website. And we are entering a space where Gen AI is kind of an intermediary between your information and your brand, because it is gobbling up that information and then sort of like putting it back out there and not always giving you credit for that. But the demand for most B2B categories has not changed that dramatically. I'd say Gen AI is going to actually like reinvigorate demand for, say, some like stagnant categories potentially. But what I would like CMOs to understand, and this is something that we've been having a lot of talks with both CMOs and CEOs and CROs, because this is on everybody's mind, because Google is often the most efficient and highest ROI channel for a lot of go-to-market teams, is that not all traffic is created equally. And if like you had a glossary that defined terms, unless those terms are cutting edge terms that people are really trying to understand today, like if you were a company like say like Fireworks AI that allows you like fine tune and build open source LLMs, like defining a lot of things around fine tuning, like LoRa and QLoRa and things like there's a lot of hunger for that information, like MCP and things like that. But if you're like defining, what is a performance improvement plan and you're an HR platform, that's commodity information, and it was never going to do that much for your business anyway. Like if someone who needs a definition of what a PIP is likely unqualified to buy your HRAS. So I think like a lot of SEO traffic was this top of funnel, very unengaged audience. For a long time, Growth Blaze has been talking about sort of this thing called the two audience concept, where the majority of folks coming to the page just need a definition, and then a subset of those folks that fit your ICP want to deeply engage with your content. And that content had to work for both of those audiences. That audience one, that unengaged audience, they rarely need to click through anymore, because in Google search, the information is given out to them in the AI overview, or in ChatGPT, they can get that. It can be contextualized to them. They can go back and forth with that top of funnel information. But when you need to dive deep, and when you don't want, say, like the aggregate generalized sum of information, but you want strong opinions from people who operate in the space and know what they're doing, content still really matters. And what we're seeing is like, yes, less traffic is coming through for the what is definitional thing, but for things that solve for jobs to be done, that tie to the platform, that speak to specific use cases, or for emerging topics like things around agentic AI or vibe coding, or whatever, like the sort of like where technology is moving, search still works very, very well today. And but I'm getting a little bit away from this. So sorry. But the thing I really want CMOs to understand is like not all traffic is created equally. Like if you have a, enterprise ETL tool and someone's looking to move data from one enterprise data source to another, like, I'd say like complex database, like something that's, real time, essentially like a real time data pipeline. And it's like a tutorial on how to do that. That traffic, and then if you can showcase how your product does that, is much more valuable than like, what is a data warehouse? And I think for CMOs, they typically are zoomed out and looking at like, what is our overall traffic? How is this channel doing? And they don't understand the difference between, say, like how many people are looking for our brand each and every month and how many people are looking for non-branded like search terms that we drive traffic through with SEO. And oftentimes CMOs, when you talk to them, they're like, oh, organic search is so performant for us. It's so effective that we can actually spend more on paid because it lowers blended CAC. And it's like, whoa, that's actually your brand. Like that is people searching for your brand that have already seen your ads, that have already experienced your product in some way, or experienced your brand in some capacity. And they're coming with the intention to opt in. SEO is kind of this different thing. We're pulling in like net new visitors who are not aware of your brand and not necessarily ready to opt in. So I think CMOs look at the aggregate, much like actually Gen AI does, and they don't really drill down to like the types of traffic and get an understanding, like not all traffic is as engaged or at each stage. And like, I think it's like too much of a view of a funnel, like this classic view of a funnel that CMOs have. And it's like, no, a lot of those people are not even ever going to enter the funnel. They've got no intention of doing that. They just want to do it for a definition, and they were never going to buy anything. They're a college student potentially. So I think there's kind of just a traffic for traffic's sake and not valuing traffic at different levels of intent and qualification, and just viewing it at this 1,000-foot view level, which I don't think is that helpful. And I know CMOs have a ton going on. So for them to be like, well, what type of content, it's tough, but breaking that out and segmenting that traffic and understanding, like, is the traffic we're losing actually that valuable to us? Did it actually ever generate revenue? Like Will Reynolds, a CEO that I worked for, runs Seer Interactive, brilliant guy. He's actually the VP of innovation now, but brilliant guy. And he's talked a lot about, he's like, my traffic is the lowest it's been in years. My leads are the highest they've ever been.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, was that traffic actually ever that valuable? Probably not.
Yeah. You were telling me there was something that, and again, this is something that I think we wouldn't know if we're not studying the craft, is Google released something around basically better attribution around branded traffic or branded conversions, was it?
Yeah.
Or something to that end. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Google just released this. It's in beta right now, so it's not like fully out, but the new conversion metric, and I could see this getting kind of looked at either way, depending on who you are, as a positive or a negative, but a new conversion metric for them is after seeing your ad, like after seeing a YouTube ad, do they search for your brand on YouTube or in Google? Like, do they come to you direct? So like Google is now looking at the ability to like drive people to come direct as a conversion, because that's them looking specifically for you versus like, again, searching for the category and opting in. And I think something that you shared with me is the users that were acquired via paid, like pure paid, transactional, like signing up for, say, Hopin or StreamYard back in the day. They had some of the highest churn rates, and they were some of the lowest customers. So this idea of like shifting away from just converting them at the moment when they're looking for like, streaming software in Google to no, they actually bought into the brand and be able to measure that. That's a way that Google's moving, because I think we've gotten so geared towards last click. What was the term they searched for? What did they convert on? And not actually thinking about like, what's the true LTV of this, instead of just like the ROAS. So, Google's starting to look at more like, can we get people to come directly to the brand, which I think is a very interesting shift.
Yeah, I think so too. Because I think so often we say that you can't measure brand. And I know that's like, there's some truth to that. So I'm not trying to like, make a case for something that doesn't exist. But I think just there are ways for us to better articulate a journey that customers or users or members of your audience can go on, and at least understand some of the leading indicators that what channels brought them to the brand. And so, goes to something else I've learned from you about this idea of just being everywhere, or just being in the channels where your audience is already engaging, having a presence there. Oftentimes these are things we can't necessarily measure directly, but we know have a big impact. The other one to ask about is GEO, as if we need more acronyms, 3-letter acronyms in marketing. But now I'm sure you're getting asked about this all the time. It's like, okay, well, do I have to now invest in discoverability in the foundational models? I think there's like a bunch of technology that is kind of popping up around that ecosystem. And so again, for the overwhelmed CMO that's trying to figure this whole thing out, who's carrying the bag, carrying the number, isn't a digital marketer by trade, is GEO like the next big wave? Is it a little bit overinflated and hyped up? Like how should we think about GEO in context of our broader kind of digital strategy?
No one's asked me this before. But kidding. But someone, I forget who it was, but a CEO was asked in an earnings report recently, like, hey, what inning are we in AI right now? He's like, we've just sang the national anthem and we're sitting down with our hot dogs. Like the game hasn't started yet.
Wow.
And I think, OpenAI is really impressive technology. I also think like Friendster was really impressive technology when that came out. And it's like, who is going to win this race is still very undetermined. And like, it looks like Anthropic is catching up to OpenAI's revenue. OpenAI is still way ahead of them, but Anthropic's revenue is growing at a faster clip, I believe, even though they're starting from smaller numbers. But I would say with GEO, it's a shiny new channel and it's very promising. And I'd say for some industries like open source software or developer tools, it's really important. But I caution companies from shifting everything into this new channel because it's not there yet for most brands. For some brands, it's growing very quickly, but those brands have a ton of traffic and they're very established. And it's the big shift. It's really like SEO, traditional SEO is really about like ranking your webpage for the term and getting like 25 to 30% of the clicks or searches, the searches that turn into clicks for that term. Now with GEO, it's basically recommending like the most likely outcome or like the most probable thing to say. That's how these LLMs essentially function. If you are omnipresent around that topic online, it would be weird for the LLM not to recommend you. Like if you were like, hey, what are the best brands for computers? It would be odd if it didn't recommend Apple computers. It was like, hey, what's what are the greatest sports teams of all time? It would be strange to not recommend like say the Yankees. I'm sure people hate that. But it's you want to be the most likely outcome, and the most likely outcome, very similar to traditional search, is being a brand and being omnipresent in your space. Someone much smarter than I, Alex Burkett over at Omniscient Digital, coined this term surround sound SEO. And it was like, hey, you don't just want to be having that one page that ranks for that term. You want to be mentioned on every single page on positions like 1 through 20. Like you want to be omnipresent and just saturate the topic fully. You want to be so dominant in this space that people can't not mention you. So that's really like where GEO is shifting, or what the shift is it's less about just like your own media and a lot more about earned media that leads you to be recommended in these tools. I'd say though, like, I think we're also at this space. I kind of use this graphic of Slack's growth versus Microsoft Teams. And there was this time when I was like early in my job in tech where like Slack was like this new cool tool. And it wasn't like this thing that you dreaded when you heard that clacking noise. But
haunts me in my dreams.
Yes, I hate Slack. But Teams, I'll say Teams is worse though. Like when someone sends me a Teams invite, it's like, oh no, let's not do that. But Teams had the install base. And that's why they grew, because they were able to bundle it, sell it with a bunch of other stuff. I think that actually like Google search has the install base today, and that a lot of people, as Google rolls out its AI mode, which is sort of a similar interface to ChatGPT, but very different. Similar, I say, like mechanics of like threaded conversations, being contextual, being more personalized, but very different. Because I almost view ChatGPT as like a workbench for work and not so much knowledge retrieval. I know people do use it to search the web and get new information. I don't like it as much for that personally. I like it more of a place to like craft documents, craft strategy, go back and forth, use it as a writing partner. AI mode, I think, is very buggy and in its early stage. But I think that Google, just by sheer nature of having that install base, is likely going to win AI search still. So I'm much more focused today on like what are AI overviews ranking, because it's going to be the same model or similar model, and what is Gemini populating for us versus OpenAI, because we have access to probably 50 different brands, Google Analytics. We run reporting for every company that we work with.
Yeah.
There are some companies, specifically open source software companies, because I think one, a lot of technical people use these tools today. And with open source, the models can fully understand the technology, and there's a lot more writing and community about open source. So again, brand leading to visibility, that they tend to see a lot of traffic. And I'd say AI native tools also tend to see a lot of traffic to these tools, because I think people kind of sort of max out the capabilities of ChatGPT and then get recommended tools that can do the thing that they're looking to do. But I don't, and I could be wrong here, but I don't foresee OpenAI becoming like the conduit of the internet in the way that Google has. Like I think Gmail and Docs and just this like sort of bundled workspace and digital identity leads to an install base that's going to be very hard to tackle. So while we are monitoring OpenAI, and OpenAI definitely drives not even the 80-20, but like the 95-5 out of traffic from Gen AI for all of the brands that we work with. It's clear, like Perplexity is a little bit up there, but for the most part, OpenAI is leagues ahead of everything else. I don't think that'll always be the way. I do think that AI mode and what will eventually become default AI, Google's AI search, will likely be a bigger traffic driver and have a larger user base than OpenAI.
Okay. Do you see the moves that these foundational companies like OpenAI, like Perplexity, around building a browser as sort of their way to kind of compete with Google ultimately, in the sense of, I think the Comet browser, is that what it's called, is now in beta, or I think there's, they're opening up kind of access to that. Is that their way to sort of become the interface for search and steal share from Google? And do we need to pay attention to that yet? Or is that still kind of an evolving trend?
I think it's like, yes, it will lead to people using those tools as like the default search, but I think it's more, and I'm stealing this from Michael Mignano from Lightspeed Venture Partners, but it's actually more, I think, about data collection, because Cloudflare is like default new accounts on Cloudflare block OpenAI and they block Anthropic. So if you sign up for Cloudflare today, not if you're using Cloudflare already, but if you sign for a new account on Cloudflare, it defaults blocks AI scraping, because the founder of Cloudflare, Matthew Prince, very much believes that like the incentive structure of the internet is going to break, because if you create content, you typically do that for like shares and likes and traffic. And if you don't get those things, why would you create content anymore? So they're saying, like, with Google back in the day, it used to crawl for every 2 pages it crawled, it sent 1 visit. And now it's like every 20 pages it crawls or something like that, it sends 1 visit. OpenAI is like for every 5,000 pages it crawls, it sends 1 visit. And Anthropic, I believe, is every 20,000 pages. I may be getting those stats wrong, but like Anthropic sends very little traffic. OpenAI sends some, Google sends more, but they're all kind of, Google is going down on that level. Because the incentive structure is at risk, Cloudflare et al. Are likely going to block a lot of these tools. The browser allows them to collect more data and more personalized data. And I think it will lead to better outputs from the models. So I think it's less about will it be the default search engine and more what unique data will it get that it can't get from the open web, because it's going to see everything moving forward.
Super interesting. Well, look, I have we have some news this week that I thought could be fun to unpack as well. About 24 hours ago, Meta released their manifesto for what they're calling personal superintelligence. which by the way, I love the brand design on this page. First of all, but you can get a sense of this. They're sort of trying to take this interesting position, kind of as a different kind of position than the other foundational models, around a more human, for lack of a better term, relationship with AI versus one that's more dystopian, more trying to replace humanity. One of the quotes that Mark Zuckerberg had there was that the rest of this decade seems likely to be the decisive period for determining the path this technology will take, and whether superintelligence will be a tool for personal empowerment or a force focused on replacing large swaths of society. And so, we were kind of going back and forth on Llama and Meta and kind of where their model even currently stands today relative to the others. But I'm curious to get your take on their positioning kind of in general, and trying to be more of this kind of personal version of superintelligence versus one that's going to replace the marketing team or the knowledge worker kind of ecosystem more broadly.
I think this memo is more reflective of where Meta's at as a business versus, like, I think if Mark Zuckerberg could sell enterprise contracts for AI, he would, but they don't have that. They don't have that offering. They don't have that sales team. They sell ads at an enterprise level, but like, Google has Google Cloud. They have people that can sell Gemini. OpenAI, like, extremely useful tool. There is a huge enterprise use case for that already, and Anthropic as well, which I actually think will be like more of the enterprise sales player. Meta doesn't have that. Meta has an open source AI tool. Meta's own engineers have stopped using Llama for coding, and they now use Anthropic for coding. And Llama, I think for certain things is great for like massive scale and low risk. But I don't think that the models are it's just not as good as Anthropic. It's not as good as what's coming out of OpenAI. I think they can be fine-tuned in certain ways to be like very impressive for specific use cases. But the foundational models, the foundational commercial models, are extremely good, and they're getting cheaper. And this view of like, oh, it can be like a chat buddy it can be your friend.
Yeah.
I think that is like non-mission critical stuff. And I'd say for some people, they probably think it's mission critical, and people will probably use it for therapy, and that is mission critical. But I think Mark Zuckerberg's memo is more reflective of like where Meta is at with AI today than like the future he necessarily, because I'm sure if he could close massive enterprise contracts to sell compute, he would. But that's not where their business is at today. And I think it also kind of aligns with Meta is not other than selling ads, is not a B2B business that has like they had Meta Workplace, I believe it was called Workplace by Meta. Failed hard.
And Customer, I think they had with a K, was like a
spun that out.
Yeah.
They're not a B2B software company. So I think like that view of like, where is AI going to go? Oh, it's all personal relationships, which by the way, that's what we are dominant for on the internet today. We are the place where you communicate, whether that's Instagram or WhatsApp or old school Facebook. That's our bread and butter. So it very much aligns with like, where is their install base? What can they do best in class versus like necessarily the true future? Because I think, yes, there is like character AI shows us like young people do want to have conversations and relationships with AI.
I just don't get it, but all more power to them.
I mean, I'll say when we lost our last dog, I used the voice mode in OpenAI to kind of process that, because he died very suddenly from an aggressive form of cancer. And it was tough for me to like process, and it was very emotional. And having that back and forth and being able to talk and express things that I think I'd almost be embarrassed to say to a human about like how much I love that dog and how unfair it felt. That was really helpful for me. But I also was like that. I like that it didn't have a name with OpenAI.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, this is just a voice that like you can basically have a conversation with and go back and forth. Yeah. But I understand where Zuckerberg is going, I sense, which is like these avatars that have a personality that you can go back and forth with. Yeah. But I think that's kind of what they're limited to today.
Yeah. And they're trying to swim in that lane. And sorry, by the way, for your dog. I know that was so hard, man.
Oh, thank you. We got hold on.
Yeah, you gotta bring them up. Give the people what they want.
We got
oh,
this is
what's
Charlie.
their name?
This is Charlie.
Hey, Charlie.
4 months old.
Oh my goodness, so sweet. But I get that feeling. In sort of a different way. You mentioned like using ChatGPT for therapy or something. This is probably not like I think actually Sam Altman was on the record of saying like, just know what you tell ChatGPT is subject to legal review should we be subpoenaed for information. So be careful. But I found that I have a lot of like health related anxiety. I found that like there are things that I'm afraid to like ask a doctor or a nurse or something because they think I'm insane, basically, that I could speak to this like non-sentient thing and it's trained on all of this health knowledge that it could at least, give me some response in the moment versus having to wait to make an appointment or like whatever. So I get it. I think there are some of these use cases where, that'll spill over to the personal side that I think is actually going to be really helpful. So I think that's net positive for society more broadly.
So I agree with you, and I have used it for some medical stuff. Like honestly, when we did find out the news about our dog, and I got the diagnostic, I like uploaded a bunch of like medical scans and everything, and it was in his blood work, and it helped me contextualize it. And it was not great news, obviously, but it was very helpful because I think like I was just in shock at the vet's office, and like being able to do that after, very helpful. But I think we kind of touched on something where I was like, Meta and their belief of super intelligence is almost like putting humanity into AI or having like some level of humanity in there. And I think, you had a post the other week that caught my eye about sort of like the humanity in brands and B2B marketing. Yeah. And it's like, I'm kind of curious about that because I think I might have DM'd you this. I was like, yeah, I don't about humanity and I just need the product to work and I need it to be like effective. So I'm kind of curious, like where you see, because everyone's talking about like humanizing AI, you're talking about humanizing brands. So I'm curious with you, why do you think brands need humanity to work? Like, I think there's a difference because there's like founder led companies and that founder is that humanity. But like, I don't really look at Salesforce as being like a humane company that I relate with. It's just a CRM that works. And well, it's a lot more than that now, but I'm curious, like why you think humanity is this like next big stage for brands.
Well, you mentioned this kind of when we started. I've kind of been quiet lately. And a lot of what I've been doing for almost a year now is just trying to figure out where is this all headed? In what role do I have as a founder, CEO of a startup that didn't, ultimately work out, to a CMO? Do I go back into like an early stage CMO role? Like, what's the move here and what are the implications 2, 3, 5 years down the line? And where that reflection where I'm starting to get a lot of conviction, and I understand that not everyone will agree with me when I say this, is over the medium arc of time, I think about 80% of what we call marketing today will be automated. And that doesn't mean every human loses their job. I think we need orchestrators, we need managers, we need expertise to really help kind of craft kind of what we'll call sort of some of the transactional part of the marketing role. But when I think about like what remains, what is that 20%? I think it's the things that appeal to our humanity as not just buyers of software or users of software, but people that are trying to use these tools to achieve some type of end, deliver at work, get promoted, like whatever the case is, whatever they're trying to do, sell their company, like, name your outcome. And so you start to get into like, what are then those elements of what makes us human that influences our purchasing decisions? And it's things like authenticity, like you referenced founder brand, like people want to buy things from people they like or they trust. And I think authenticity really is that gateway to trust. It's creativity, doing whatever you think of the astronomer video that came out, last week with Gwyneth Paltrow. These are the things that get us talking, get us really kind of energized. I was in Paris just last week, and just seeing just how beautiful the architecture is, the craftsmanship of the food and the music, everything. Like we want, as parts of us that want to celebrate what we as humans do best. And then there's things like this, having conversations, connecting, feeling like we belong to something bigger than us. And I think that historically that has been kind of like the softer side of marketing, or maybe viewed as like the arts and crafts side of marketing. But I think increasingly, if you believe every product actually solves the problem, so let's address your concern. Like otherwise, like good marketing isn't going to solve like a bad product ultimately. But if you believe that the product is delivering on its promise and delivering value for the customer, then I think what influences who we want to buy products from, whose help do we want to enable, do we want to recruit to help us solve our problems beyond just the technology, but ultimately what we're trying to do with the technology. What communities do we want to be a part of? Those are very human things. And I think for a lot of companies today, as I'm observing a lot of both the early stage AI kind of boom, it feels like so much is getting funded. It's hard to tell what's an experiment versus like a real company. There's a lot of budget being thrown around for trying things, right? Like I think, especially in marketing, I think we're actually being pushed and incentivized to adopt AI and try products and try to find new use cases. I think we're putting things like building the humanity of our brand, activating that out the world, starting a movement behind this broader kind of change that we want to create. I feel like that's being pushed aside, or sort of it's not at the top of the list, and maybe it doesn't have to be, but I think increasingly it'll be the thing that separates us in a world where we have a lot of options for great products that work and deliver. So anyway, that's a long answer, but I think that when I think about the new charter for the CMO going forward, in my view, and again, from timelines, who knows how long this is going to take, like 3-5 years, maybe longer, is we need to find a way to orchestrate the transactional side of the marketing using AI, using these agents, using the team that we have to figure this out, but then over time get more efficient there and spend more of our time on things like, again, brand, content, in the true kind of valuable content in different mediums, some like this that might be absent from search, but could be repurposed in really interesting ways. Events, getting together in person, building communities of people. I think if we focus more of our time on those programs, I think the net impact and the net outcome is going to be much greater over the long arc of time.
I love that. And to kind of add to, I think like, I don't know how to say, I'm going to say this without cursing, but I think there's a lot of like BS marketing jobs right now that are essentially like toil. And when I think of some of those jobs, it's like, I don't know, like what's more important? Getting like really granular in a Google Ads console and figuring out like exact right targeting, or making like extremely provocative creative that changes people's mind. And I think so much of like the tactical work, like early days SEO was like just a ton of like kind of BS tactics. And it was almost like we knew the secrets that allowed us to get the traffic, but like, was the work meaningful or like engaged? Like, no, it was like it was like basically filling up parts of the internet no one ever visited to influence the parts of the internet people did. And I think that there's actually a conversation I was having with my wife the other night. Like, there's definitely going to be some jobs that go away or some functions that get minimized, but I think that opens us up to things that only humans can do. Because the thing I'm seeing with AI, to steal from Scott Belsky, who used to be at Adobe, like it requires really good taste. If you don't have good taste, you really can't wield this thing. And I think there's a ton of people working in marketing right now that have terrible taste, that essentially want to like play it safe and buy the ads and get the clicks and then let the website do its thing, but aren't creating meaningful change.
Yeah.
And I think there's also just like a ton of people that go into marketing or go into content creation because it's like something that they on a surface level understand, but I'm not saying that I'm great at it. I think I'm okay, but like they're not uniquely qualified to do it. It's just like something that logically makes sense. And I think getting more of like the dilettantes and the people that aren't truly passionate about it, that don't understand the underlying mechanics and more just have it to have a job, like a fake email job, that's going to go away. And I think it's going to allow people to do like richer, more meaningful things that they actually care about versus like, oh yeah, I send emails back and forth to affiliates to get them to promote our offers. Like that's a job that should be automated. Similar to like, I don't know, people used to add up things in a manual spreadsheet before Excel, and we don't really like cry about those jobs going away. I think in a similar way, a lot of the jobs that are going to go away are the things that are purely manual toil that don't bring people a lot of satisfaction.
Totally. And with all the respect to those that honestly will be impacted and have to potentially either upskill, reskill, whatever. I think this is all net okay, is what we're saying. Like the risk to my post that I shared was a lot of folks were like, is he like a doomer for like the future? I'm like, I'm actually super optimistic about the future of marketing. I just think we can't run away from the fact that a lot of jobs are going to be automated. To your point, maybe jobs that, 20 years from now, we'll look back and say, gosh, I can't believe like that was a full-time role for someone, right? In this new reality. So again, it's a tender topic, and I want to, make sure I'm being empathetic, because there's a lot of folks that are going to have to go through some hardship, I think, to figure out what's next. But I think that the future of marketing is quite bright. And in fact, forgive the pun, but maybe a golden era of our practice where we can kind of get back to doing the creative work, to doing the work that we've wanted to do as a practice. But I feel like over in the marketing automation, inbound marketing era, we've just tried to engineer so down to each sort of, line in the spreadsheet to really cost justify. And I think I'm hopeful, I guess, that there's sort of a new era dawning here.
Yeah, and I think I pretty much all my ideas are stolen. Like it just is what it is. But Aaron Levy from Box kind of talked about like this concept of like, oh, AI is going to like eliminate these jobs, and that assumes that like capitalism stops being hungry for more capital. And I think like if anything, it's going to push us to raise the bar, because we're not going to have to spend the money on the manual toil. The amount of times like we've run a content campaign or an SEO initiative with a company, like, wait, so we need to produce like 50 articles that are all kind of similar and interrelated and say very similar things, but you're saying we need to do this because it maximizes the amount of traffic that we can get. It's like, yeah, it's like, well, these articles are boring and I don't want to write them. Like, why do we need to put as much budget into this? And it's like, well, they wouldn't need to be boring if we could use AI to generate them and then have humans focus on leveling them up and making them better.
Yeah,
I think we spend so much budget on just getting the foundation right that we don't have time to actually like create something unique and engaging and meaningful and memorable, because we're spending all our time just getting something stood up. And if AI can get something stood up for us and we can focus on what makes like the meaningful and unique and like more, I'd say like the things that people aspire to do but don't really get a chance to do in marketing. Like that's where I see AI taking this. I don't see AI having great taste, at least not for a while, and just automating us away. And then people being like, okay, like we don't need humans anymore. It's like, no, humans are going to need to direct and manage and orchestrate these things at scale. And even if we can have the AI orchestrating the AI, there's going to have to, I think, always be some human in the loop until Skynet takes us out. Like we're going, like, I think that this idea that, oh, we're just going to stop having work to do and that we're just going to be satisfied with the amount of revenue that these things bring in without iterating and up leveling and bringing humans into the loop. I just don't really see that as a possibility, because there's never been a technological revolution where people have just stopped having work. Certain jobs have gone away, but I think people have had more meaningful jobs that unleash greater productivity and greater growth with harnessing technology versus technology stopping the need for human-derived growth.
Yeah. Sam Altman's essay about the intelligence age talked about lamp-lighters. Lamp-lighters would have looked at the work we're doing now thinking like, that's impossible. Like that's magic. That's not real. And yet today, like, there are no more lamplighters. Folks are off doing different things. And I forgot how you worded it more eloquently than that, but we don't lament like the loss of the lamplighter role or something to that effect. Jay, just to start winding us down here, you know, the other thing that I think has been resonating with folks as I'm sort of having these conversations is that this is all a lot to consume. Like, but tactically, my job's changing. Existentially, my job might be at risk. Like the pace of this disruption is frankly moving faster than we're wired to handle it. And so something that I think has been, again, resonating with people that I've been talking to about is how do we sort of hang on to our humanity as we're trying to deliver at work, as we're trying to maybe manage, you know, our own kind of wonderings about what's going to happen in the future, keep pace with every new release to each foundational model. Probably a world that from an SEO perspective, you guys have sort of maybe been privy to Google's kind of shifting gears, maybe not as fast as what we've seen today. But I'm curious, to the extent you're willing to share, like what are some things that you're doing to just invest in your own wellness, you know, I don't know, peace kind of through this otherwise rather turbulent season of work?
Yeah, I mean, so everything's changing in my space rapidly. And I think it's impossible to try and keep up with it. I do block out time for education and like staying up. And I'd say like being informed makes me feel better. I'm also constantly testing, iterating, bringing on new tools, trying to change process. And I think one of the things, and I'll get into the mental health thing in a second, but one thing I've learned that has made my life a lot easier is we've tried to originally like AIify our processes. And what I've learned is that's the wrong way because our processes work for humans. They don't necessarily work for AI. So I think rather than trying to bolt AI onto the ways that we do things, which is going to create a lot of pain because that's not how it's supposed to work, reinventing things to be an AI native workflow versus automating things that we did as humans with AI. So that's been a big shift, and it's allowed us to change how we operate in a way where I'm not stressing because it doesn't work to bolt AI onto human processes. But I'd say basic things I'm doing for my own health is one, I walk like at least an hour to an hour and a half every day and just clear my head. Do not listen to podcasts, just kind of do my thing, maybe a little music, but I try and unplug pretty regularly. I also, you know, I have hobbies that I love. Like I am a wine collector and I specifically unplug from this and I create dedicated times for learning, dedicated time for work, dedicated time for innovation and experimentation. But I think it's impossible to try and keep up with everything and being open to that. And it's like, if something is important enough, it will bubble its way up to me. I'm not going to find little bits of information that are these massive unlocks that no one else will. I just don't believe that's how things work. So understanding that I cannot drink from a fire hose and that the droplets that I need will find me along the way. And I'm going to have to be comfortable not having everything and not being at the bleeding edge of every aspect of AI at all times. And kind of trying to be, as a phrase I love, an anchor of reality in a sea of confusion. And thinking about things instead of because there's a lot of hype right now. And to be frank, if we were to hype up Gen AI search, and all that, we could probably sell bigger contracts, more money, be a little bit fear-mongery. It's just not how I want to be. And I think rather than everything's changing, the sky is falling, we need to do this immediately, having like a calm, even, measured approach, which is how I try and go through life, has led to calm, even, measured clientele that's easier to work with and not fearful. So I think approaching this from not, we have so many problems, sky is falling, but more like we have so many opportunities is really a mindset shift that I've needed to go through to navigate this new zone.
Yeah. I'm hearing maintaining a sense of optimism, creating space for rest and unplugging, maybe even a little bit of giving up control of the outcome and being able to believe that the most important work's going to, like news bites or whatever, are going to rise to the surface. I think those are all good things.
I know we only have a few minutes left, but I'm curious with you because, you know, you're going through a reinvention stage right now. And I'd say it would be very attractive to be like, how do I build something AI? How do I do this? But I think things are changing so quickly. It's like, well, it's kind of like playing like what is it, like jump rope? Like when do you hop in? Like when is the right time to strike?
Yeah.
Like a full. So how are you trying to navigate this change and figure out like the right re-entry point for yourself?
It's a good question. It's a whole other podcast. I think 3 years of building a company as a founder and it failing is trauma that I did not anticipate. And that the sort of mourning period has been a little bit more impactful than I thought it would be. So the idea of just starting another company as a software business, at least, at the moment is not attractive to me. Now, I think there's a lot of truth behind second-time founders having a lot more wisdom and avoiding a lot of the mistakes they made the first time. So that part is interesting, but I don't have conviction right now on a software business for what I want to do next. Increasingly, getting passionate about some other ideas. I don't think I'll ever be a CMO again, if I'm being honest. And I think that's something that I've been grappling with. There might be like one company in the world that I would join. But outside of that one company, I don't think jumping back into the seat is something that I would do next. And so I think, like, again, like anyone, I'm taking a chance to like not sit back and like leisurely, like don't do anything. I've kind of fallen into some consulting projects that kind of pay the bills while I figure out what's next. But I think conversations like this one are affirming that it's actually never been a more important time. I think for marketing generally, but how that takes shape, I'm not quite sure yet.
All right, man. Great. Good answer. And like,
right.
I think we're going to follow up in a few months and I want
Yeah.
to here again.
We'll do it. Right. JH, thank you so much for being on the show, and everyone else for tuning in, and we'll be back next week.